All right, you're left.
All right, I'd like to call to order the November 18th meeting of the Chagrin Falls Board of Education. Ms. Brudenell, if you would please take the roll.
Mr. Rankin.
Here.
Mr. Kinzinger.
Here.
Mrs. Brose.
Here.
Mrs. Garvey.
Here.
Mrs. O'Toole.
Here.
All right, if give me just a moment. And sorry, I don't know how to change it for some reason right now. So find your closest American flag, and if you wouldn't mind standing and joining me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
States of America, and to the republic
which
stands
one
nation
under
God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. It's a habit to stand, so I'm sorry you had to look at my chest for 2 minutes. First, we have the approval of minutes. If there is somebody can make a motion for the approval of the minutes of October 7th and October 21st.
So moved.
Seconded.
All right, thank you. Is there any discussion? All right, seeing none. Ms. Brudenell, if you'd please take the roll.
Mr. Rankin.
Yes.
Mr. Kinzinger.
I think you're on mute, Greg.
Yes. Sorry.
Mrs. Brose. Mrs. Brose.
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey.
Yes.
Mrs. O'Toole.
Yes.
Okay, great. Now we'll go through board reports. If you have a report, please state it. If there's no update, then just let us know. Mrs. O'Toole with the Audit Committee and Board Policy Committee.
No report for the Audit Committee. For Policy Committee, I'm going to read my notes here. November Policy Development Quarterly has recently been issued by Ohio School Board Association. From my quick review of this PDQ document, it does not appear that we are required to make any significant policy changes at this time, but there are several policies that OSBA is suggesting changes to, so we will probably convene a policy committee meeting before the end of 2020 to review and discuss any implications of changes. Then I do just want to note that the board's ability to hold and attend meetings virtually is set to expire December 1st, 2020. I'm surprised that at this date, we still don't have any resolution on whether that's changing, but OSBA is continuing to lobby for an extension of this language and will provide us with updates on these efforts. But absent changes to Ohio Revised Code language, rather than the flexibility granted through temporary law and in light of current provisions expiring December 1st, our policies remain as they were before the pandemic and reflect current permanent law. But we did, as suggested by OSBA, we took action to pass a resolution suspending portions of our policies that conflicted with the temporary laws. So we'll keep reviewing this and hopefully be current when things change. And I mean, I expect that things are going to change before that December 1st deadline.
Yeah, there's a bill in the House, there's a House or Senate right now. I think they're pulling it out of the 305 conversation just to get it through. So I think everything, at least that I've heard, unless Ashley's heard something different, that'll move through and be approved.
Yeah, I mean, it just makes sense that it would need to. As COVID is increasing right now, our ability to have virtual meetings seems more important than ever. So.
Yeah, the last I heard was the same as Dr. Hunt, that they're pulling it out of 305 because that is definitely not going to pass in time. And they'll attach it to something else that will pass. They know that it needs to get done.
All right, and that concludes my report.
All right, that's a good one. That's lively for policy. All right, Mrs. Garvey, if you would update us for business advisory, capital planning, and budget finance and committee. Finance and budget committee.
You're on mute, Catherine.
My computer told me I was muted before you guys got to it. Sorry about that. Yes, there's no report for business advisory, but capital planning, our committee met yesterday. We reviewed the projects in the facility improvement plan, or otherwise known as the FIP, and confirmed that the PI fund that's budgeted in the 5-year forecast that we'll be looking at this evening is adequate to support the FIP project implementation over the next 5 years. The committee recommends that the board adopt the PI fund budget component as detailed in the 5-year forecast that we're reviewing this evening. The committee also recommends holding off on design work for the bus garage, with the caveat that in 2021, we will need to investigate ways to finance this master planning project, as the costs are outside the scope of the current projected PI fund. We also approved an updated committee charter with really just some slight language changes, but we'll be bringing that to the board in December for adoption. With regard to the board finance committee, we also had a meeting on Wednesday, October 28th, to review the 5-year forecast in detail. And the committee recommends the board adopt the 5-year forecast as presented by the treasurer. That concludes my report.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. So yeah, just to highlight, so that the bus garage, also we're holding off design work for the bus garage. Okay, gotcha. So the bus garage is still out there, still to be addressed.
The only other thing that I thought was really of note is that upcoming in the HVAC projects for this coming summer is to have air conditioning in all of Gurnee. So by the start of school next year, we would expect the full building to be air conditioned. I thought that was of note for the board to know.
You know, be careful with the word air conditioning. Cooling and air conditioning are not quite the same thing. So it's close, but not what you think. So
maybe dehumidified air.
There will be an improvement to the air quality and conditioning at Gurnee. And if you want more details, we could certainly bring that back to the committee or to the board for a report later.
Okay. Thank you. And finally, records retention. We have no report. Next, we have Dr. Hunt and his superintendent's report. And before you get started, Bob, I guess I just ask, not for the record, but for the people, how are you feeling?
That was not a dramatic pause. I was trying to find my unmute button in the format with the screen. So appreciate the you asking. I'm doing well. It's certainly kind of an interesting sickness and illness, and I feel kind of blessed that I've had the support that I've had. So I appreciate a lot of people have reached out in the kind words. I'm doing well, and hopefully around the corner here by the end of the week, and can get back to being 100%. So thank you for asking.
Yeah.
Bob, I wish we could make the world more simple for you, where you could truly just take time off to recover. But it seems like every time I turn around, there's something that makes your life more complicated. So please lean on us and, of course, your staff as always. But if there's anything that we can do in any way, we definitely want to support you having time to get better.
I appreciate that very much. I've got a great staff, and I think it's everybody's 2020 as it never seems to end, but we are starting to see a light at the end of the tunnel. So I appreciate that support. So two reports tonight, and then I want to open up the conversation in item C. Originally, we had planned to make a 7-12 athletic update, or recommendation, which I will make, but things have got a little more complicated this afternoon with the release of an advisory from Cuyahoga County. So I'll open that conversation up a bit wider than athletics. But before I jump into that, I do want to provide the board an update with the work that's been going on with our DEIJ task force. This is one of the district goals and initiatives this year. We've tried to really focus on what's really important. And I think everyone agreed that This was the time that we needed to start this work, and we needed to make it a very systemic, authentic conversation that led to meaningful change. And so to help with the facilitation of that, I felt it was appropriate that we step back and we bring in an outside organization to assist with that. So I want to thank the Board of Education. You in a prior meeting approved a contract with the Diversity Center of Northeast Ohio. They have been our partners in kind of prepping for and starting to walk down this path. I certainly have been to talk through kind of where we're at thus far. Catherine has represented the Board of Education on this. So Catherine, if at any point you have comments, you want to jump in, feel free to do so. So these are the individuals from the Diversity Center that have helped us thus far. Really, our goals are to kind of collaboratively develop a vision in the areas of diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice for our school district. And then, more than that, identify and establish clear, measurable actions that we can implement over the course of the next 3 years towards the attainment of that vision. So it's not only kind of creating where we'd like to be, it's really a conversation about what are our strengths and where we're at and where's that gap and what are we going to do in the next 3 years to make progress. The goal would be that this is a kind of a first component of the next strategic plan that is completed, and it just rolls in and it's part of that plan that's measured and monitored in terms of implementation over the next 3 years. The structure of this group has really been something that we've worked through with the Diversity Center. And if you kind of look at the bottom of that, we had over 70 people originally volunteer and want to be a part of this. And I will be honest with you, one of the takeaways of 2020 will be maybe the format in which we meet with parents, because I was a bit hesitant to even go down this road because I was worried about the level of engagement we would have or be able to have in a virtual environment and not meet face to face. Well, that has completely been the opposite. We've had consistent high numbers in the meetings that we've had, and I think the level of engagement has been very, very good too. So that's just something that we should think about as we do work and engagement going forward. There might be just something too, being able to walk in your office and get on the computer real quick while the kids are having dinner. That makes more sense than me having to drive up to the school and be a part of something. So the task force is essentially going to meet once a month. That encompasses everyone that expressed an interest. Those meetings are typically kind of updates on the work that's been done and kind of the steering committee or the guidance for that. There's subcommittees. There's 4 subcommittees. There's a student subcommittee, parent subcommittee, educator subcommittee, and a school and leadership subcommittee. We went through the process of kind of developing co-chairs in each of those areas, and we kind of introduced those folks actually on Monday night at our meeting. And then the steering committee is just made up of representation of each of those groups, so they're kind of steering the work as we go forward. So here's the list of people that showed up and volunteered, and there won't be a quiz on who's on this committee. I just share this with you to show you the amount of interest in this topic and this conversation. And it really is representative of our entire school community. And I should say school and community. We've got students on here, teachers on here, community leaders that don't have students in the school anymore, parents, board representation, administrators. So it's a very, very deep bench of people, and looking at some of their backgrounds and the work that they even have done professionally, I think they're really going to support our district in moving this forward. At the top, under each of those committees, you'll see who's actually co-chairing each of those groups. So just again, a wide level of involvement from our constituents. The subcommittees, really, they're going to do the brunt of the work. So we are now at a point we're going to break up and start to do subcommittee work. Their job is to really represent and share experiences of the members, of the stakeholders, gather data on experiences of the members in the group, and really kind of guide the work as we create that vision as a first activity. So that'll be the work that's going to happen in the next 2 months under the leadership of the subcommittee leaders. Just an overview of our first 2 meetings. Our first meeting was really kind of a little bit of get to know you, but also starting to wrestle with these terms, because I think when you say a term, it can mean a lot of different things to different people. So a lot of people think diversity and they think race. Well, that's a much broader term, and in developing an understanding of that and framing that for the group is something that we talked about in our first meeting. Then we went through and actually talked about some of the differences between these terms of diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. Really just trying to get everybody in the group kind of on the same page in terms of the vocabulary that we'd be using, and as they kind of proceeded with their work. And I love the graphic of equality and equity that they shared with the bicycles. I think it really kind of helps frame what that the difference between those two things are. Our second meeting was kicked off by Dr. Lavelle Brown, and we met Monday night. Lavelle is an outstanding superintendent who I've gotten to know through a kind of a national organization that I'm a member of. Very passionate about the work of diversity and equity. In fact, he's stepping away from his educational position so he can really focus on this work on a national basis. And I asked him to come in to just really kick off our group and hopefully inject some energy, because he has a ton of passion for this, and as well as hit on the importance of this message or this conversation, but also the courage it takes to do this right. You can have this at a very high kind of superficial level, maybe put a few things in place or say they're in place and move on. And we've tried to commit as a group that this is going to be meaningful and probably difficult. And for that to be, for that to happen, this will be a committee that's going to be in place over, a significant period of time. But Lavelle told a little bit about his story, talked about some of the work that he has done in this group. And I believe, he does a lot of training with staff on the teaching and learning side. I'm going to keep the relationship with Lavelle as we walk through this. And I really believe he can help us once we get to some concrete actions of what we want to do. I just think he is an excellent resource that can help support that work. So that kicked off meeting two. Meeting two ended with a discussion of the process we're going to go through. And if you're familiar with appreciative inquiry, actually kind of the creator of appreciative inquiry, a lot of people don't know this, was a parent in our school district, Dr. Cooper Ryder. His kids went through Chagrin Falls schools. But appreciative inquiry at a very simplistic level is, instead of focus on all the things that are wrong and what should be done, you start with an appreciation of what are we doing well, and what are those things in place that we do well, and where do we need to kind of expand on those things and build from there. So that is the process that the Diversity Center typically uses, and just introduce that process to our group in meeting two. A little more kind of what that process looks like, and you kind of just follow the arrows on this. You define and affirm what our topic is and what the center of our work would be. The next phase of that is discovery, which is kind of understanding what is currently in place, what do we appreciate, and what are our strengths. That's the next thing that we're going to start doing with our groups. Then it's kind of this imagining of what a vision could be for our school district, and then designing things that will kind of move us in that direction to eventually reach a destiny. And it's this kind of circular process that we're constantly going through to improve. So that's very quickly some of the work that we have done thus far. I wanted to provide the Board of Education an update on it. Catherine, I don't know if you have anything you'd like to add, but I felt it was appropriate and necessary to kind of bring the board along as we go through this periodically throughout the year.
No, I think that was a beautiful overview. I'll just reiterate, we recognize this is work that will be continuing. Also, I think it's difficult work that we need to be prepared for. It's going to require some growth and some conversations and change that will probably be slow, but very deliberate. So yeah, I think we're off to a great start, and I look forward to seeing where this takes us in the next few months.
I know it was quick. There's any questions from the Board of Education?
The only question I have is in the community subgroup, I believe that we're going to need to bring the wider community along outside of our district to really achieve the change that we're seeking. And so I was wondering if there's a way to incorporate some of the, leadership from the town, local councils or mayors, or just to leverage them as we go, as opposed to just keeping them updated.
Yeah, I think that's a great feedback. Part of the training that these committee leaders will go through is to try to expand their group. So I think there's an opportunity there, and actually making personal touches from me, to mayors and even, some of our church leaders, I think would be helpful, because this is a cultural shift that can't just happen in the school district. The community should be part of that, and that's great feedback, and I'll certainly incorporate that.
And
Any
even
other-
beyond local elected officials, other leaders of organizations in our communities.
Yeah. So, and if you have specific people you think would be great, feel free to forward those names along, and we'll submit them out to the subcommittee chairs so they can extend an invite. Okay. Sorry, that concludes diversity equity. I am going to stop the share right now so Becky can share her screen. Just a little bit of background. This year is different in a lot of ways. We would typically get our state assessment results. We would get a peek at those results in June. We would get final results from the state in July, and we would start working with our teacher leadership teams and district leadership team to set goals for the upcoming year specific to academic achievement goals. And we would also kind of evaluate strategic plan and what initiatives are there. Obviously 2020 is very different. And one of the things we don't have is we don't have any achievement data from last spring, because those tests weren't administered. So we have spent the beginning of this year really trying to get a benchmark and understanding of where are students at, what gaps were there as a result of potentially going into the remote environment so quickly last March, and then kind of identifying and utilizing iReady predominantly to identify growth goals that we would share for this year. So this presentation is going to kind of give you an overview of not only some of the data, comparing last year, 19 scores to 20, to give you kind of some perspective on where students are at, but also give you an understanding of the things that we're going to measure our success upon as kind of an administrative team and staff this year in terms of student achievement. So I'm going to turn it over to Becky to walk us through.
Thank you, Dr. Hunt. The K-12 administrative team, along with our central office administrators, have collaborated to develop a systemic district data goal for the 2021 school year. And it reads as follows: each school will meet or exceed identified growth in grades K through 8 and proficiency targets in high school courses identified in math and English language arts, and described within the identified performance indicators that we will see toward the end of the presentation. So as Dr. Hunt mentioned, because of the stay-at-home order in spring, the ODE assessments were not administered for spring 2020. So our most recent data from the state is from spring of 2019, so that it's reflected here. As a result of the spring 2019 ODE assessments, our district earned an A relative to the achievement component. The only indicator that was missed was 8th grade math. And middle school math, just in general, continues to be a point of focus for our district. You might remember from presentations following the release of the report card that we talked about, once students come to the middle school, there are more than one option for math courses, some of which culminate in taking an end of course exam rather than taking a 7th or 8th grade math test. So you can see the number of students tested decreases in 7th grade and even decreases more in the 8th grade. So that is definitely a point of focus for our district. In fall of 2020, all K-8 students who are not yet enrolled in a high school credit math course took the iReady assessment in math, and all of our K-8 students took the iReady assessment in reading. This initial data really helps to give us predicted proficiency relative to the ODE assessments in spring of 21. So you can see reflected on this screen, those percentages that are reflected in red are either right at what the indicator requires for the school report card and the district report card, with proficiency set at 80%. So all of those percentages that are right at 80 or below 80 are obviously focus areas for us. Once we complete the winter benchmark for iReady, we will be able to see projected growth, which will be very helpful in our work across the year. Similarly, the middle school and high school have created common assessments in many courses, including algebra and geometry, which are offered at both schools. And the high school has done work in ELA to have common assessments as well. So that will help to provide us the mid-year progress to kind of see where our students are. You can see here on this screen that there's a comparison of the fall 2019 iReady data to fall of 2020. We were really interested in this data because we were kind of fearful with the stay-at-home order and our educational environment in the spring. We weren't sure what to expect when we were comparing this fall's results to the previous fall. But actually, as you can see in these percentages with the lighter color in each reflecting 2019 and the darker shading reflecting this fall, you can see that there is very slight differences in the percentages of students. So the red reflects the percentage of students that are 2 or more years below grade level as per the iReady assessment. Yellow reflects those that scored within 1 year of their current grade level, and then the green is those students, the percentage of students that scored at or above grade level. So you can see it's only slight differences from the previous year, so we were pretty happy about that. We did, however, want to look a little bit more deeply and do some comparisons for each of the schools. So you can see here, this on the left side is the math comparison. Now, remembering too that the pots of students that were tested in fall of 2019 compared to fall of this year are slightly different groups of students. We have new kindergartners at Gurney that weren't a part of the fall 2019 testing, and our third graders from last year now tested as intermediate school students. But it does kind of give us a comparison to kind of see how we can best prepare to meet student needs. So you can see an increase of 1% here, an increase of 2% in math, a decrease of 2% here. And then for reading as well, you can see the differences. So that's definitely helped to kind of guide our work. Similarly, when you look at our 4th through 6th grade students, you can see the comparison, again, the left side reflecting math, where there's a 2% increase in the percentage of students that are 2 or more grade levels below in math. You can see a 5% increase here for students within 1 year, 6% decrease of students that were at or above. And then you can see the similar results over here for reading. Going on to
Becky,
the middle. Sure.
Are those all apples to apples, basically with COVID and without COVID, or did we have any reading or math curriculum changes in those buildings in one of the 2 years?
So last year was our year of really identifying, this is our first year of implementation of like our phonics in K2, our rollout of the Lucy Calkins reading units across K8. So that's not really reflecting it. It's also, like I said before, not the exact same group of students from year to year. But it does.
It's a pretty good comparison then.
Right.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so when we look at those trends, I mean, before we get to this one, all of the previous graphs are pretty much indicating that we're falling behind a little bit in math, if I'm interpreting this right, because I don't necessarily want to see the red and yellow higher, but I do want to see the green higher, and the yellows are higher and the green is lower. So on, at least what I'm interpreting in math, we're getting a little bit behind. In reading, we're getting a little bit ahead.
Yeah, it's tough to say, just by looking at this, you would also need to see over time, what the performance of students were. Like the last year's third graders are now reflected in the darker shades. They weren't reflected in that previous shade because they were part of Gurney's data. So I think this just can, kind of tell us, are we headed in a correct direction, or should we also look more deeply into specific grade level data, which we're also doing too. I think this would be a really long presentation if we went through all of those, but I know at the building level, and when we have our principals meetings, that's something that we're definitely addressing. And I believe that's also a part of the principals' goals too. Each of the building principals has action steps identified, and I know I do too, that support our goals.
Yeah, and
Right. I mean,
this is a pretty powerful system in that we and certainly at the buildings at the grade levels, they'll dig into those 5%. We'll find out where those kids are, what intervention plans are they on, and then we'll start tracking their progress as they go through the year.
Mm-hmm.
I personally thought there would be bigger gaps coming off of March than we're seeing here. But there are some areas that you scratch your head at, you look at, and you say, okay, well, let's find those kids and make sure we're intervening with them and putting them in the right places.
right, but at least this data kind of matches what, at least what I hear from my very limited sample of students is that, through virtual, that math is a hard class to do through virtual. It kind of lines up with this a little bit. I realize these are small moves and stuff, but the data kind of lines up.
We also too, I think over time, it will be really interesting to look at our math scores just in a general way, since we have had Bridges in Math up and running, which has a more tactile component of the, of learning, as well as having the Bridges intervention that supports that for math students, and then the LLI program and ELA. So we have some really good things that are in place and that are just taking off. So it's really good data to continue to monitor.
Sorry, just to interrupt again, just one last question, so as we go forward, I know you say not that I'm asking for us to get into this granular at all right now, but will you be able to see, do you think in the future, look at the granularity of like, what is the progression and make any assumptions around what is the progression of like a virtual student versus a hybrid student, something like that?
We might be able to. I think it would be also very interesting to look student by student and to look at which model was selected and how their performance has changed over that course of time. We're actually compiling 6th through 10th grade data sheets now and factoring all sorts of different data pieces to kind of put it together. It gives a really good picture of students over time. And I like to compare student A to student A to see kind of what changes over time.
But we will be able to, after we have an additional benchmark and we have growth data, you could parse out how much growth did we see in in-person students versus virtual students.
Absolutely.
Start to look at data in that way.
Which actually is a perfect lead in to our next slide. One of the things that we truly love about iReady is the ability to monitor individual student progress. So one of the things that you'll see in the performance and indicators on the next slide is the use of expected typical growth for students. And that's actually a measure that's based upon each individual student in their grade level, and then the placements that they have based on their score. The percentage of progress toward expected typical growth is calculated by determining the actual growth, which is the difference between the starting score, so the fall iReady, and their end score, and dividing it by the expected typical growth. And I know that's a lot of words, so I thought I would provide a quick example. Terry Tiger, a third grader, took the iReady math test, scored a 440 on it in the fall. So iReady has a whole placement chart that looks at the score relative to the grade level and decides kind of what placement those students would fall into, which placement category. That would place Terry at a grade 2 level in math. So that would obviously make him one grade level below his current grade level of grade 3. So that would mean, if you follow along on the chart where it matches with 3, that would be 26 points would be his typical growth measure. So if on his final test in spring, he scores a 467, if you subtract 440, his fall score, from that 467, you get a difference of 27. So then if you divide that, that's obviously more than 100%. So he would have met his growth goal. So expected typical growth would have been met. So I think the principals and I really feel good about this because it does drill down to the individual students. So as you see here in the K6 performance indicators that support the district data goal, that at least 90% of all K6 students will have expected typical growth in math and reading, as evidenced by iReady. And similarly, for our 7th and 8th grade students that are not yet enrolled in high school credit math courses, 90% of those students will evidence expected typical growth in math. And all of our grade 7, 8 students take iReady in reading. So at least 90% of those students will evidence expected typical growth in reading. Unfortunately, iReady does not go beyond 8th grade content. So you'll see that there's a transition when we hit the performance indicators for high school from typical growth to proficiency. So we felt like it would be a good reflection to look at least 90% of students that are in Algebra 1 or geometry at the middle school or at the high school will be proficient or higher, as evidenced on the end of course state assessment in spring of 21. And similarly, at least 90% of students that are enrolled in ELA 10, which would be honors, or CP 10, and the AP seminar students that are 10th graders will be proficient or higher on the end of course assessment as of spring. So that kind of summarizes all of the ways that we would be indicating and supporting that district goal. We have all identified action steps that support this work. We could drill down even further, but we're really excited about this work because it does impact students. So
How was the 90% derived at?
You know, we talked about 80% because that is the obviously the target for the state report card, but we wanted to kind of ramp it up. So that was kind of our negotiation among the group of what we felt like was really fair and where we wanted to be. Of course, we'd love to see 100% across the board, but we wanted to really establish something that would be achievable, but yet would really cause us, you know, to work. Any other questions? Well, thank you.
Thank you. That was great. And I know this is all work that has had to come together in absence of the state tests. So I appreciate the amount of work that's been done. And it's great to know that we still are able to keep track of the kids and making sure that no one's falling through the cracks and that they're growing the way we would have them be growing to the best of our ability in a typical year.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to share this data with the board. You know, we typically set it around either PI or achievement scores on state assessments, but it is actually this data that is more meaningful for us. This is the data we use to watch students progress throughout the year, provide interventions, put them in programming. So this is a little more authentic, if you will. although new to you, it's what we've been working with and on over the last 3 or 4 years within these building leadership teams, teacher-based teams. So it's nice that the board gets to see this as well. All right, Becky, thank you very much. If there are no other questions for Becky, I'm going to let her go for the evening.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. I'm trying to get my screen up here. Okay, to 7:12 athletics first. Obviously, with the increase in spread, we've had various issues arise with our winter sports teams. Not to my surprise, to some surprise, Ohio High School Athletic Association put out a survey last week to superintendents, principals, and athletic directors. Basically a variety of options, including pausing until January, canceling season completely, pausing with practice, just different options. They came out this afternoon essentially saying they're going forward. And then they stress that this is obviously can be a local decision. I think with what we're seeing with spread in our ultimate goal of focusing on keeping kids in school as long as possible, my recommendation is to pause 7-12 basketball and wrestling at this point from now until January from competition. So to continue to allow them to practice internally with their cohort, but not compete, travel around to different arenas. I think swimming and hockey kind of fall into a different bucket for a variety of reasons. And if you have questions about that, I can maybe address those. But I did want to make that initial recommendation regarding sports this evening. So I'm going to pause there before we move into the Cuyahoga County advisory that was put out this afternoon. Any questions on athletics?
I just wanted you to clarify, is it just practices or games going forward?
No, we're going to allow them to practice within their cohorts, but we are not going to allow them to compete or scrimmage other schools. So not send them to other places and bring other students and fans to our gym.
How are athletics affected, as well as other extracurriculars, if we do go entirely virtual?
There's a variety of, we can handle that however we want. Districts handle that very differently. They can allow them to continue as normal and compete. They can put them on pause from competitions and let them practice like I'm recommending, or they can completely put them on pause. So that's a total local decision.
Just to reiterate then, as pivots might be necessary, you would be also including an announcement about extracurriculars and sports and how those will be affected by any pivoting that we have to do.
Yes, I certainly would.
From the beginning of school opening, so all the fall sports, did we have, what percentage of students at the 7-12 grades, do you know off the top of your head, participated in an extracurricular that was getting together like a sport?
I don't have the data from this fall. I would say that typically is, we have a high percentage of kids participating. I think the numbers like high 70s, 80% when you look at it from a year basis where they involved in some extracurricular, but I don't have the stat for the fall. Knock on wood, because I guess they're all done. We had a very good fall season in terms of COVID and allowing them to have competition. I think it wasn't a normal season for anyone, but they had some semblance of a season. I think that the dynamics are completely flipped. I think they started in an environment that was pretty darn good and set up for them to be successful, and it's gotten dicey towards the end. I mean, you've got schools that are playing in state championships now that have quarantined teams into virtual environments just so they can continue to participate with the current environment. I think our winter sports are coming in the midst of everything escalating, and pressing pause now gives them a better chance in January moving forward to have a season. I should update you on the league. We did attempt today to try to get the league to come to consensus on a recommendation that all would implement, and there was not enough votes to support everyone pausing. So I don't want to name the schools, but we have been in conversation with other local schools that are pausing as well in a similar fashion. We want to continue on with our league in January if it makes sense and schedule with them. But if for some reason, those teams weren't not interested in that, we do have a cohort of teams that we can play and participate against and schedule competitions with, if that makes sense.
It might be helpful to look and see of the students that participated in the virtual academy, what percentage of them also participated in a sport, as we potentially move to pivot the whole district to virtual learning at some point, if that needs to be the case. Then it would be good to know how parents feel about the students being at home learning during the day, but their willingness to have them participate in an extracurricular. I'm curious to see the choices that parents are making.
Yeah, I could, I guess, but I don't know.
Okay.
I think I'm going to keep my guess to myself today. Are there any questions on sports? And just to be clear, that would apply to middle school as well. And that would go into effect immediately.
Immediately or after Thanksgiving?
No, immediately. I was considering after Thanksgiving due to an event, an opportunity that our girls basketball team had this Saturday, but that team is likely either quarantined now or will be quarantined. So that isn't possible. So at this point, it's effective immediately.
I'm sorry, the Chagrin team will likely be quarantined? Okay.
Okay, I want to shift to an advisory. I'm not sure every board member had an opportunity to see this. I forwarded to you as soon as I got it, and I don't remember what time that was. Cuyahoga County put out an advisory this afternoon. Just to revisit, because we've had this conversation before. I think in early September, Cuyahoga County put out what they called a recommendation at that time. A recommendation is different than an order. It's still the choice of local schools to make decisions. An order would come from the government. I did check. Now the words advisory, does advisory mean anything different? It does not. It's not to be considered an order. That doesn't mean you don't take it into consideration as you're making decisions. But just wanted to put that clarification out. I'm not going to read the entire order to you because it addresses a lot of variety of different things. There is language in the advisory that basically says K-12 public and privates are advised that are currently implementing hybrid or full in-person protocol are advised to transition to online remote learning after Thanksgiving. So that's what is in the current advisory. To remind you, they also made the recommendation back in September that we should be in remote learning under red in the advisory system as well. I did reach out, I know we've done this kind of balance of trying to understand what's being communicated from Cuyahoga and also what's being communicated from Geauga. So I did get a chance to reach out to Tom to see if anything significant had changed since he talked to us last Thursday. This is not, in any kind of formal communication, so just take that for what it's worth. But essentially, as of today, no advisory like this is in the works at this time in Geauga County. He will be sharing this with his Board of Health in anticipation that we too could be in that situation at some point in the near future. And then he pointed out, especially if the hospital capacity is compromised in Geauga County. So it does not look like in the near future, and when I say near future now, at least in the next couple of days from Geauga County, that we are going to hear anything. I am on a call with Tom and the Geauga County superintendents tomorrow. We typically have that on Thursday. I have nothing that leads me to believe this, but I'm curious to, kind of why or what changed with Cuyahoga, and would be interesting to see what the advisory system has tomorrow when the governor kind of makes his, his normal Thursday press conference. So I don't know if there's any questions regarding that advisory from the board.
Well, I just want to comment that I feel that we're in a different place now than we were in September with regards to what this district is seeing and how it may align with the Cuyahoga County recommendations. So I heed their caution. And I also think that our students have a little bit of PTSD from last year, you know, sort of just leaving one day and then never going back prior to it was a little bit prior to spring break. But to the extent that we feel like we can make the right decision in advance of Thanksgiving, I think it would be good for the students, especially, to leave for break with some sort of idea as to that it's going to be a prolonged stay, versus waiting to closer and maybe having more timely data, but not giving them as much time to process and say their goodbyes and gather their stuff.
I think it's a little hard for us to know how long, but Bob, am I correct? I did just scan that, but it seemed that the advice was to stay virtual for at least 28 days, so 2 full cycles. That puts us at December 17th, but I think it would be likely if we decided to do this that we would stay virtual through the end of the year and then revisit come January to see how things are going. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe our winter break is the 21st. I think we have a full 2 week. Oh, you know what? We might have a couple of days. Actually, I think we do have a couple of days that week.
Yeah.
But honestly, to ramp everybody back up on the 17th or 18th for a couple of days, I doubt that would make sense.
We would do that. The other reflection that I have, and I know, it's probably unlikely we could get the Cuyahoga County Board of Health Commissioner to join us like we did with Geauga, but to me, this advisory packs more of a wallop because they certainly have the kind of data that we discussed about the districts that have been holding in-person classes and some of the international data we have about how students are impacted by this. And with that knowledge, have issued an advisory for districts to go entirely virtual. So to me, that says they believe there is a risk of having students in classes in person that can be obviated, by going to the virtual. And then the second thing that I'd be interested in learning more about is where you're driving at is what's driving this. I assume it's contact tracing and what's happening within the hospital systems. It seems to me our community probably relies more on the Cuyahoga County hospitals and physicians than it does on the Geauga. I might be wrong about that, but that certainly is relevant that we wouldn't be putting additional cases into their workload if they're at a point of being very overwhelmed. So those are, I think this is a really serious advisory that's been issued. I think that we need to very seriously consider following this, and I'm sure you're going to be exploring that.
Yeah, I will tell you, not that they don't, I've never heard them talk about international studies. I think everything they do is local. Not my concern, but my thought is this is one piece of information we do have to take very seriously. I mean, it's a health department making advisory. Just even when they said red should be remote, I thought we should take it serious and take it into consideration. I think with the elements of what nothing has changed from my perspective from a week ago, other than you're starting to see the stress of staffing in every district around us. I mean, I think if you talk to other schools, some of it is quarantining, lots of students quarantining. I think Mayfield had a significant number and that played into their high school remote, but everybody is talking about staffing and the implications of this on staffing. So that remains my greatest concern right now. But in taking all of this in, I do think it's something we have to strongly consider. What I don't want to do is make a knee jerk. It came out at 4 and let's decide at 7 we're going to be remote, because of the implications of taking the students remote for the next month are pretty significant. So I want to make sure that we work through it. And if we do it, we're going to do it in a very thoughtful manner that sets our students up for the best possible success that they can. And I would like to dig into Geauga County a little bit more just to see where his thinking is and why before we kind of make that final decision. There's a lot of things you can do. You could do it as, we've both been, some of us have been, reaching out to other schools. Some are aggressively going after this Friday, trying to take a few transition days. You could go through next Tuesday, take a few transition days on Monday, Tuesday, the following week when we get back, and then go remote from there. There's a lot of options out there. The other thing is I need to work through with Becky. We took some time at the beginning of the year with our staff to prepare and give them time to open. So our number of hours is not as flexible as it normally is in a given year. So I need to make sure if we decide we're going to transition out and we need a day for staff to do something, or 2 days for staff, that we actually have that, or at least if we don't have it, we all know we're adding days on the end of the school year to increase hours. So there are some things we need to work through. I think we learned some things last March in terms of our most at-risk students. I don't think a full remote is the best thing for all kids. I think we're going to have some kids that we're going to need to continue to bring into school at some capacity. So I just need to work through some of that. And I need to do it quickly, obviously, with the seriousness of this order.
Is the issue with staffing that if they're quarantined, they can't teach in person, but they could teach virtually?
No, we have people teaching virtually that are quarantined. We try to have a sub in the room because kids are coming to school. There's some people that are just sick and can't. The issue with staffing doesn't just mean teachers either. There's drivers. We had 4 drivers out. We're not a huge transportation department, so all of the pressure of staffing. West Geauga had to put out something that essentially asked parents to drive students to school. So staffing means a lot of different things. And there are people that get COVID that can't work. They need to take the time to recover, and it just hits everybody differently. So it's really from all ends right now.
I understand. I can see your wheels spinning about the things you'd still like to put in place for our students and our staff before we transition to virtual. I do think we need to be cognizant to balance that, though, with, I think we model behavior for the community at large. And I think to the extent that we respond to this.
I'm not suggesting a 3-week transition.
No, I know. I got an email right before this meeting from a different organization based of extracurriculars saying, we don't really know what this means for us, but we're looking into continuing to plan to operate as we have been. And I think we have to check ourselves and be willing to also make the difficult decision to take the lead in going virtual, when I think that a lot of people are going to be dragging their feet because it was pretty painful last time around.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. And the other piece of this is, I think our parents also, if we go in that direction, need enough runway to make arrangements so they have coverage. So all of that is, weighing on me in terms of, I understand we need to expedite it, but we also have to give enough runway and time for people to prepare and also be thoughtful with our staff. The good news is the transition of the schedule was a big concern. If we went from hybrid to remote, that transition is done at the elementary building. So that's a huge piece that sets us up for success.
Bob, do you have, well, first of all, this is the perfect example of what I wish you weren't having to deal with while you yourself are trying to recover. I don't know that there's much we can do to assist you, but taking it off. And I also think that very rarely are we in a position where we're encouraging you to move faster, because I think you have an incredible ability to assimilate vast amounts of information, gather input, and make decisions, and take that type of a leadership role. And so that's not a characteristic that we worry about at all in you as our superintendent. That said, do you have a sense of when you would expect to have some more information for the community and the board?
Yeah, I would. I want to meet with my administrative team tomorrow. I called them all together for a couple hours tomorrow. So I want to work through what it is, and I think it's time for people to start preparing for that reality, whether it's before Thanksgiving or shortly thereafter. I think it's, from what we're seeing, unless behavior, and I don't even know behavior change now, makes enough of a change in where it's going, that it's going to change things. But I'm comfortable enough to say we're going to get there. We're going to be remote at some point here, if trends continue. So start to make preparations for that. I'm comfortable saying that tonight. What I would ask the board is the authority. I know you've granted me the authority to transition before, but I would likely try make some type of communication probably before the end of this week. I don't want to have to pull the board together for that. If if we make that recommendation, you would know why that is.
Yeah, I don't see a reason to hold another board meeting. You certainly have authority, and it's nice that you've added this to the agenda this evening. I think we're all very clear on what's happening within the state and within our counties, and if we need to go fully virtual, we know why, we need to do that.
Yep. Yeah, I think we've talked about it a few times. We know what data sources you're pulling on. Obviously it would help if you can share the data sources with us, because we'll try to help explain it to the public to the extent that we can. But no, we've gotten to examine you going through these thought processes before. I'm comfortable with your approach.
Yeah, and I think to not overreact to the letter, obviously it's a piece of information, but I will tell you staffing is pressing internally here, and it's not unique to Chagrin. I mean, we've tried to solicit, anyone who has a bachelor's and an interest in subbing, we tried to deepen our pool. But that is certainly a driving factor in all of this right now.
Is that hitting us at a particular school, or is it across the board?
It was one particular building, but that has leveled off. And, it's funny, I was on with the Kenston superintendent before he got tonight, and I said, it ebbs and flows. So 2 days ago, we walk into a day with three sub shortage. And then today we have people coming kind of off of quarantine. So you get a little bit of breathing room, and breathing room is you're staffed, you're not trying to combine, different people or asking teachers to sub during their planning period. I mean, that can only go so long, and you're going to burn people out. They can't plan and teach and do all of that. So that is the biggest factor right now. That and quarantining is starting to catch up to us at the secondary level.
Just another little question about it. Is it the fact of like subs falling out, or teachers having to take sick days?
It's staff being either sick with COVID or on quarantine because of COVID, and then add the other layers of life happens, sicknesses and children's illnesses and things of that nature. I mentioned transportation over the weekend, 4 drivers. That's significant for us. So Mike Morgan, we sent a late email out with route adjustments, and that was mostly because we had to redo routes because of shortage in drivers.
Bob, I know this is really premature, but I noticed the governor yesterday started talking about a schedule of vaccine disbursement within the state, starting with the nursing homes. Next time you update us, I'd be curious to know if where schools, it would be great to see teachers getting vaccinated very shortly after those who are, really, really high risk. And I wonder if there's been any discussions. Again, I don't expect an answer tonight. I'm sure that those discussions are just starting to happen, but as your superintendent groups are lobbying and informing the governor about what we need, that certainly would be a help.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, as much as we don't like to hear this kind of news, at least it came out today, you know, rather than we had our meeting and tomorrow you got this information. But it really does make us all just pause once again and say, you know, where is this disease going? And let's just hope the vaccine, yes, comes out soon. And after 2020, we'll start a new year and hopefully a new, better plans and get back to some more sense of normalcy. But it could be a while yet.
Yeah, definitely.
And to me, this is definitely the worst this disease spread has been since it started in our area. So, and with Thanksgiving and Christmas coming up, I can't fault you if you make that decision. So,
Okay.
that makes sense.
All right. So I would anticipate an update either way. I mean, I have to address this order probably in the next 24 hours with our community. They're obviously going to be aware of it, and we've already got media calling tonight about, you know, how it's impacting. So there will be something. Obviously, I'll communicate with the board as I move forward through the next 24 hours.
Okay. Anything else, Bob?
That's enough for today.
Okay, thank you. Next for the treasurer's report, Ms. Brudno, try to top that.
Yeah. Okay, I am going to present to you the 5-year forecast. I'm trying to share my screen here. Okay, can you see that?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I am first off going to apologize to anybody who pulled the forecast report off of the agenda before about 8 o'clock last night. I did have to make one final change. I realized last night as I was kind of going through everything last minute, just like my last overview, and noticed that I had not included encumbrances for any of the year ends that are forecasted. So I had to put those in there. It doesn't change any of the cash balances, but if you did pull the report off before last night, the report that is going to be submitted to the state, assuming it's approved tonight, is a little bit different. So if you want that, go back out to the agenda and pull it again because it has changed a little bit. So 5-year forecast, I always like to start this with reminding everybody that this is an estimate. It represents what we know right now. If I could see into the future and I knew exactly what was going to happen, I'd be really, really good at my job and I'd probably be making lots of money elsewhere if I could see the future. Circumstances in Ohio school finance are constantly changing. As we have all seen this year, things change very quickly. The forecast makes lots of assumptions. So if you are pulling that report, please read the actual assumptions and don't just look at the numbers because there are a lot of variables that go into those numbers. I'm going to talk about some of them tonight. If I sat and tried to read to you or list every single thing that I've had to assume in coming up with these estimates, we would not make it home by the new requirements to be home by 10. So I'm not going to do that. And also just reminding you the 5-year forecast is only the general fund. So we have other funds, all of the federal funds, PI fund, all of that is separate from this. This is just talking general operating fund. So for those of you who are bottom line people, you just want to see the summary. You don't want to talk about or look at all of the individual lines of revenue, and your eyes are going to glaze over after this slide. This is the one you want to look at. ending balance here, ending cash balance, these numbers look a lot better than what I presented to you in May. Obviously, we have passed a levy, we've cut lots of expenditures. We're doing everything we can to keep this ending cash balance healthy. So looking out to fiscal 2025, we're looking at about a $12 million cash balance, assuming that everything that we've built into the forecast actually happens. So I'm going to start off with revenue. This is just a really quick picture of what our revenue looks like. And I will talk about all of the things that are going into here, but it looks, staying pretty steady. Revenue slightly going down, slightly from 20 to 21, and then going back up. Most of that is because of taxes, and I'll cover that in a second. So when you're looking at our revenue, it's important to talk about how much we rely on our property taxes. I know I make this point often. Our schools are not funded adequately by the state of Ohio. We are very reliant on our taxes. And as some of those revenue sources start to go down, you can see that our reliance on our taxes is only going to increase over time. So right now, about 77% comes from our general property tax. And then in 2025, we're estimating closer to 80% coming from our property taxes. So I'm going to go down through each line in the forecast. If you have the actual forecast in front of you, the spreadsheet kind of format, I'm just going to start at the top and go down through every revenue line and then every expenditure line. So starting with the first revenue line, also on each of these slides up here in the top corner here, I've created a little pie chart on each one of these to show you the portion of the revenue or the portion of the expenditure that we're talking about, because all of the column charts that I'm going to show you look like they're on the same scale. They are not. When you're talking property taxes versus some other source of revenue, the smaller percentages are not, don't have as much of an impact on our forecast and are not quite as important. So property taxes obviously is our largest source of revenue. It is made up of the effective rate times our valuation times our collection rate. So I underlined effective rate there just because I want to remind everybody about House Bill 920 freezes the amount of revenue that is collected on any voted millage to the amount that was collected the year it was passed. So as our valuation goes up, our property tax revenue does not go up with it. So I just want to make that clear, that it's based on the effective rate, not just the voted rate. And then our collection rate as well. Just because we levy taxes doesn't necessarily mean that we collect all of those. So you'll see here going from 20 to 21, a slight decrease. That is mostly because of the collection rate going down. And that's just a result of the environment that we're in and the economy taking the downturn that it has this year. You do see it does go up then moving into 22. That is, because we passed the 3.85 mil levy. In 21, half of a year's collection isn't included in here, but because we do expect right now property tax collection rates to stay at the lower levels until the economy picks up, it's not really showing as an increase here. But moving into 22, 23, and going forward, I think we are all hoping that we will be back to normal and our collection rates will go up with that. Moving on to public utility personal property. This line, House Bill 920 does not apply to. So this is the full voted tax rate that we would collect on. The PUP is usually collected at 100%. So we didn't see a decrease here as a result of the economy, and we wouldn't expect to. And then as valuations go up, you will see increases here because House Bill 920 does not hold that revenue flat. Unrestricted grants and aid. This is our state foundation funding, and you see that large drop from 19 to 20, and then picking back up a little bit. Most of that is about $140,000 of that is the actual decrease that we experienced. Oh, I'm sorry, I lost my place here. That they informed us of in May. Originally, we thought we were going to lose closer to $500,000, and then after some lobbying and some help from Senator Dolan and some others, we were able to recover some of that. So we didn't lose the full amount that we originally thought we would. We only ended up losing about $140,000. So the other reduction in there is that was a correction of an error. And I know I've covered this a couple times as we've gone through these forecasts. So I'm not going to go into it in detail, but if anybody wants to know, I certainly have all the records and can show you. This is a line we expect to stay flat going forward. We do not expect this to change right now. However, if it does, if going forward the formula were to change, if they were to get rid of the guarantee, anything like that, those types of things can, with this, the swipe of a pen in Columbus, can really change this line for us and then have a significant impact on our forecast. Moving to restricted grants and aid, this is mostly catastrophic cost here, and I've listed up here, some of the other smaller items that go into this line. This one is kind of hard to predict because it's not all determined by what happens in our district. And just notice here that this very small portion of the pie that we're talking about here. But the way they do the catastrophic aid is every district in the state submits for the amount that they were requesting a reimbursement, and then they take the amount available and distribute it. So it's not the amount that we actually submit for. It's fluctuated, right around 35% of what we actually submit for. So even if we know what's going on with our students and we can predict what's going to happen with our students in the next few years, we can't predict what's going on all over the state. So, we don't necessarily know what our portion of that is going to be. So this one's kind of hard to predict. So we just kind of take an average and hope for the best here. Property tax allocation line. This is where our homestead and rollback reimbursements are recorded. This one is pretty consistent, kind of reflective of the property tax collections. You can see a slight decrease from 20 to 21. That's just, collections went down. We do expect this to stay pretty consistent throughout the life of the forecast. Other operating revenue, again, very small piece of the pie here that we're talking. This is one of those lines that kind of, they don't pull all of these things out, and they don't think that they're important enough to include on a separate line. So they kind of lump them all together. Kind of hard to predict. The changes here, this decrease from 19 to 20, and then the larger decrease from 20 to 21, this is mainly our tuition that we would collect for all-day kindergarten. In the spring when we were virtual, we refunded tuition that had already been paid for all-day kindergarten because there was no difference between the all-day kindergarten and the half-day kindergarten when everybody is at home learning. So we refunded those. And then going into 21, we, for the first part of the year, we were on the hybrid model. And again, there was no difference between the half day, the full day. So we didn't collect revenue there. And then in addition, in 21, this is further decreased because we were still making some of those refunds that applied to fiscal 20. So again, moving into 22, 23 and forward, I am hopeful that we will move back to normal and we will move back to a more traditional model of education, and we would see a difference between the full day and half day and start collecting tuition again. Before I move to expenditures, does anybody have any questions on the revenue? Okay, hearing none. So expenditures, this is just the general overview here. You do see increases every year. You know, like I will say this, we do everything we possibly can to control that increase. But with inflation, it's inevitable that expenditures will slowly rise over time. I would like to point out that, you know, the difference between 17 to 20 is that's a 3.7% increase over a 3-year period. So, you know, over the last couple of years, we've only increased an average of 1.2% in our expenditures. So certainly less than inflation. You know, we're doing the right things. We're doing everything we can. You can see that decrease from 19 to 20, and that, you know, represents the cuts that we made in our cost reduction efforts that we've focused on in the spring and then coming into this year. Important in expenditures as well to point out that, you know, the majority of our expenditures are salaries and benefits. This is the cost of our people. This is, you know, this is what we do. We educate kids and we use our people to do that. That's where the majority of our expenditures goes. And I'll talk a little bit about some of these other lines, and you know, purchase services looks like a large one, and I'll cover that in a second.
Are they, just
Yes.
on the last graph, were they both FY 2020?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, that is 25.
Okay, that's what I thought.
I
I
will-
just wanted to
I
make
apologize. I will correct that.
Sure. That's okay. You just
Yeah,
told
this is a comparison, just, you know, showing from the FY20 is the actual from last year, and then the furthest year out that we have forecasted. I apologize. That should say 2025 right there.
That's what I thought.
thank you for
Just
that.
wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
So again, you know, keep an eye on these pie graphs when I go through these, and just to keep perspective on what it is that we're talking about here. This is our salaries and wages. This is our largest expenditure. It's rare that you'll see a decrease in this line in schools, unless there are cuts made going from 20 to 21. You know, this is where we are making we're implementing the cuts that we talked about in the spring. And then going forward, you know, we kind of, we drop that line, but then that line does continue to go up because we do still continue to pay our people, and the cost of our people continues to rise. This incline here, however, is less than what we presented in the spring, just because the world has changed, and you know, our situation, everyone's situation has changed. We don't think that salary increases will be what they have been over the last couple of years. So we're trying to be, you know, realistic here, and still expect to give increases, because we like to keep our wonderful staff that we have here. Employee benefits, you know, this is about 20% of our expenditures right now. This is one I always struggle with because it's really difficult to strike that balance between, you know, being safe and being too conservative. This is the line in this forecast that does have the largest forecasted increases. Industry standard right now is about 10 to 12% still annually. We've moved to self-insurance, where that move is taking place January 1st. So I have reduced what the increases were modeled to be, but we do still expect increases. So what I've got modeled right now is between 8 and 10% increases each year. Still less than industry standard. I'm hopeful that I am being too conservative here. But again, I don't want to not model increases there. And then if we were to see increases larger than what we have expected and what we've modeled, it could devastate the forecast. So, this is one of those, like I said, I kind of struggle with this one because this one has real potential to significantly change our forecast.
Ashley, as we move forward with the self-insurance, once we get 1 or 2 years under our belt, if we've seen some savings and pooled that for some cushioning, we should anticipate more variability in this as well, right? There will be years that are more expensive and years that are less expensive.
Yes and no. I wouldn't expect it to be more volatile significantly because we're going to have that reserve there and we'll know how much we've got in there, and we'll keep that there to kind of cushion the blow when we do have a bad year. So, but we won't, again, we don't want to build it up too much then, because then we're holding money in there when we could be taking that savings. So again, this is just that line where there's just, it's just difficult to strike that balance and difficult to predict what's going to happen.
But this line more than ever will be influenced by, the health of our insured and, how good of consumers we are of healthcare.
Absolutely. And, you can see over the past couple of years, we've done really great, even being on a fully insured model. Most of that is because plan changes were made, significant plan changes that kept the cost down. That low hanging fruit's gone though. We can't make those plan changes again. It's already done. So again, this is one of those where we lowered the line, but it does still continue to go up. It doesn't change the incline. Okay, moving to purchase services. This line, we're talking about 13% of our expenditures. A lot of the items listed here and what is in this line are out of our control, and they're not necessarily expenditures that, we're cutting checks for. These are things that come directly out of our foundation, and we have to expense them. We don't just take the net that the state gives us. We have to expense these items, and they're items that are mandated, things that are law, a lot of them. And a lot of them are, special education, excess costs, special programs, services and things that, we need to provide to our students. But they're not things that we can just do here. So that there's sort of a, I don't like the way this line is labeled. It's labeled purchase services, like we, went out and purchased things that we just didn't feel like doing. That is, not the case here. A lot of this is just, things like open enrollment out. We have a few students who are open enrolled out. That money comes directly out of our foundation. And then the special education scholarships too, the Peterson scholarships and the autism scholarships. The decrease from 20 to 21, that is mainly the elimination of the facilities management contract. So, we made that change as part of our cost reduction efforts that we committed to in the spring. The net effect or the net savings of that move, we are anticipating right now, we're estimating a $30,000 savings annually. So the contract is, that's a $450,000 decrease here. But then you're going to see increases in the other lines. So we brought on 2 staff members. Those were increases that were factored into payroll. You'll see increase in supplies for things that contract used to cover, that now we're making all of those purchases on our own. And then we do expect this to just remain pretty consistent going forward.
Hey, can I just ask you one question about
Yep.
purchase services?
Sure.
So, I mean, there were pretty good percentage increases, especially 16 to 17, somewhat 17 to 18, 18,
Mhm.
19 was pretty flat, 19, 20
Mhm.
was pretty. So, I'm just curious, given that we've seen that big percentage change year to year, 2016 through 2020, you've got it forecasted pretty flat, 2021, 2025.
So our scholarships have gone down. Little things in here like the travel expenditures and the utilities and those types of things, they're very difficult to predict. Legal is sort of cyclical. In some years, maybe when we're negotiating and new things come out, legal costs us more. So that one's kind of, that's also sort of hard to predict, but not something that we would expect to continue to increase. And then, part of these increases in the facilities management contract that had increases built in for inflation, for purchasing stuff, supplies and things, where that's not in here anymore. So that's part of it as well. Did that make any sense?
Yeah. I mean, I know it's trying to forecast a big bucket, and you've got the biggest piece in there change. So it's okay. I understand.
Okay. Moving to supplies and materials. This is where, people see what we're purchasing. They see stuff. So they tend to kind of focus in on this area, but look at how small this piece of the pie is. We're talking less than, 3%. So the decrease in 20, this decrease here is mainly due to COVID. In the spring, when we were at home, we weren't using as many supplies in the buildings and in the education. We also were not using the buses, and fuel is a large supply expense in this line. So that accounts for that decrease. The increase here is, like I pointed out in the previous slide, the facilities management. We are now going to be purchasing all of our own supplies for our buildings. So all of our cleaning supplies and maintenance supplies, grounds, all that kind of stuff. We will be purchasing all of that on our own. In addition, in this line for this year, we've got a lot of COVID expenses. We expect some of that to drop off, but things like some of the health and safety supplies like sanitizer and that kind of thing, and the additional cleaning stuff, we don't really know how the cleaning standard is going to change after this. I think we may be a little bit more focused on some of these. I don't see us like deciding, okay, COVID is over, we're going to get rid of the hand sanitizing stations. So that type of thing, I still have a lot of that built in here. And then anytime we have textbooks and electronic media, so software, we had to move kind of quickly to some more online supplies and software stuff that's in here as well. So when we moved to online platforms, we purchased more of that kind of thing in here as well. Capital outlay, this is less than 1% of our expenditures, but it's the equipment that we buy, computers, furniture, things like that. The large decrease from 19 to 20 is moving the purchases of buses. We purchase buses each year. moving that out of the general fund into the PI fund. So that's why, we don't see that going back up to those levels. We do expect this to remain fairly consistent. There are a couple lines that build into this capital outlay line in our financial statements that sort of kind of go up and down every year because we don't purchase something every year. We purchase it maybe every other year. That's why you kind of see this going up and down a little bit.
Ashley, would you speak a little bit to purchasing power and how we try to get the best deal
for
whatever we're buying?
Like the buses?
Yeah, for whatever we're purchasing, that we might work with other districts to get, the best price, or just give like a high level overview of how do we make sure we're getting a good price for the things that we're buying.
So we participate in purchasing programs like the Ohio Schools Council, which, a great example is the buses. Those are, very large purchases, very expensive vehicles. And, if we were just to go buy them on our own, we would be negotiating a price, just with us, and we wouldn't have the purchasing power, how you put it. Through Ohio Schools Council, they will ask us how many buses each district is planning to purchase. They'll go and then they'll negotiate a price for, 50 buses instead of 1 or 2. So we certainly get better prices there. They provide other purchasing services as well. We are a member of consortium for some of our utility items through them, and every once in a while, just depending on certain supplies, they'll send something to us and say, hey, we have this item, we've negotiated this contract. Can't think of any other examples right now, but and then they ask, who's interested, and certainly we do get great deals through those types of programs.
Thank you. I know I put you on the spot there, but just
That's
give,
okay.
a high level overview. We're always looking for the best price. And that's one of the reasons why we have some fluctuation here, because we might buy in bulk and get a better price, for things, and then carry that into future years. And then also in larger projects, we would obviously get multiple bids and, select, for example, with facility construction in that manner.
Yep. Okay, other objects, again, this is kind of the catch-all where they throw everything else in. This includes our county auditor treasurer fees is the largest expense in here. Bank fees, audit expenses, memberships, all of that kind of stuff is thrown in here. In FY20, you see a large decrease there. Cuyahoga County gave a pretty large one-time reimbursement last year of county auditor fees. So that's why we do not, this is going back up. We don't expect that to continue. It's a one-time payment as far as we know. It'd be great if they did it every year. Other financing uses, the largest expense here is our transfers out, and I'll cover those in detail. One thing you're probably looking at is the decrease from 20 to 21, and I will explain that here. So the largest transfer out right now is to the PI fund, and the capital planning committee has determined we need about $2 million a year to keep our capital plan moving in the direction that we need it to. When the district moved inside millage to the PI fund, what we've been planning on doing is taking the $2 million that's needed and just transferring the difference between the inside millage so that the total revenue going into the PI fund is the $2 million. Last year in 20, we only had half a year collection on the inside millage. And that's because we're on a fiscal year basis, which our fiscal year ends June 30th, and taxes are collected on a calendar year basis. So in 20, we only had half of the year collection on the inside millage. So we were only getting about, 400 something here to offset. Whereas now going forward, we're getting a full year collection on that inside millage. Again, on this year, we, as part of our cost reduction measures, we committed to postponing $340,000 worth of PI projects. So I'm backing that off as well because we've committed to not spending those dollars. So we're not going to transfer those in there this year either. So the amount that's going into the PI fund this year is only 800,000 versus, moving forward, it's going to be 1.1, 1.2. That's why you see that decrease there. The other thing that we are changing this year that you will not have seen in the past is athletics. In the past, all of the salaries, some of the contracts and things were paid for out of the general fund. We're moving everything that has to do with athletics into the 300 fund. So all of those expenditures will now take place in the 300 fund. We know that athletics does not bring in money enough to support itself. So we will be transferring to cover that negative balance at the end of the year. And this is what we're estimating the 300 fund negative balance to be. And then these amounts here for all of these clubs are consistent with prior years. So there's the detail that goes into this line.
We just go back one slide again. So just to reinforce what I mentioned earlier about the capital planning committee, this is, looking at that $2 million annual PI budget and then the transfer that needs to happen from operating. This is definitely in line with what we feel is needed to support the types of capital projects that need to happen in the district just to maintain and keep replacing things before they fail. Mm-hmm. And also, I don't think you touched on, just very quickly, PI for the stadium. I believe that is the field. It's a sinking fund that we've established so that as the field needs to be redone, we've accumulated a balance there. That's a big item, correct?
Yes. Okay. Yep. And that 40,000 annual transfer has been made for a few years now.
One thing we should consider as we continue with capital planning is the value of having some other sinking funds, Ashley.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is the overall picture of all of the revenue lines I just spoke to and all of the expenditure lines, comparing them to each other. The solid lines are actual, that's in the past, and the dotted lines are projecting out. This does look different. I believe I included this same graph back in May when we updated last year's forecast. It does look different. Obviously, we have increased our revenue because of the levy that was passed, and we have decreased our expenditures and kind of kept this line flatter here, and then this incline here is not quite as steep because of all of the things that we have implemented. It's looking like right about 2023 we're going to start deficit spending here and start eating into the cash balance. And what that looks like is this. Again, this looks much better than the last time you saw this graph. This line here was coming down like this. We are able to flatten that out a little bit. Looking 3 years down the road, which is what we've committed to, is where it starts decreasing and starts getting, kind of below where we want to be and where we need to start talking about a levy. So consistent with the message that we have been talking about over the last several months. And then this yellow line is our cash balance policy, which is like the bare minimum that we can have. Any questions?
Not really a question, but just a comment, just to remind anyone who's watching that, yes, we just passed a levy and we said, it wasn't going to increase taxes you paid, yet we're showing on this increases. That's because this is only showing the general fund. We have a similar decrease in our bond fund from the bonds being paid off.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is an increase to collections in the general fund. It's no longer going to be deposited into the bond fund.
Ashley, sometimes I get questions. People are confused. It looks like the district has such a healthy cash balance, and it's not readily apparent how quickly we start relying on that, dipping into that in the event that we get beyond our forecasts and don't pass additional levies. Is there at some point in the future, when you have a chance to breathe again, a slide that could put together that could show the vulnerability of that and how it appears to be more cushioning than we really have?
Yeah. Even just right here, if you're just looking at the summary, when we start to deficit spend, we go from basically even to $1 million in 1 year to almost $2 million deficit spending in the next year. If this were to project out further, you would see it wouldn't take us very long to deplete that cash balance completely.
At some point, I think it would be helpful to have a graphic that shows it forecasted out a little further.
Right. And if you look at like the expenditures in say 2025, 36 million, that's 36 divided by 12, that's 3 million a month. That cash balance is 4 months worth of expenditures. That's just the way you look at it.
When we were trying to, come up with scenarios, when we were trying to figure out what we were going to do as far as millage and levy, we did project this out a little further, really only just taking the total and multiplying it, by an average percentage increase, and same with revenue. The further out we get, the less accurate we get. So I get a little, nervous about projecting too much further out.
Well, maybe even if there's a way to do just something more conceptual, I feel like I have an opportunity in the community to help educate people around this a little bit in advance of the next levy. So just some food for thought, something to think about. If there's a pictorial that would help me explain, to Mary Kay's point, how quickly that dissipates if we start using it, that would be helpful.
Yeah. So before the levy, when we were doing presentations and kind of showing this line, kind of went like this and it got below zero. And yeah, the further out we get, this starts to go down. We can certainly do that. It's just getting the community to understand as well that, we're pretty confident here. And then as we get further and further out, we're less confident in what can happen, because, when you're talking some of these lines, just a few percent, if we're off by just a few percent, can really affect this cash balance. It can really affect our expenditures, could go up by $1 million in a year. So that, the further we get out, it's just the less accurate we are. We can certainly do it conceptually. I just wouldn't want us kind of out there saying this is what is going to happen, because, like I said in the beginning of this, it changes so fast. Okay. Everybody looks like they're all still awake. That's good.
Still here. Just Just
Any questions?
Every word, Ashley.
Everyone hangs on every word. One thing I do want to point out, the slides, I just kind of take the graphics because that's the easiest to kind of grasp. If you really want to get into the weeds on this, the actual report that is attached to the agenda, feel free to read. And if you want more detail, you want to look at all the individual lines that roll up into each of those lines, give me a call and I'm happy to go through it. If anybody's that interested, I will totally sit and nerd out with you on all of my spreadsheets.
Well, you present a very compelling offer, but not for right now.
Nobody's ever taken me up on it.
Very enticing offer. That's what I meant to say. But no, thank you. I mean, it's clear there's like you're conservative in some areas, aggressive in others. Not very many, but overall certainly a blended approach. And yeah, the one thing with certainty is that you will be wrong.
Yes.
What a positive way to end that presentation.
There's another way to put that.
It's the truth.
Really.
Certainty that you will not be 100% accurate.
Yes.
She's going to go home and tell her family. So at the board meeting tonight, I finished the whole presentation and the feedback was, well, the one thing we know for certain is you'll be wrong.
There you go. Catherine said it so much better than I did.
I knew what you meant.
You're not going to be 100% correct, maybe 99.4. It's not bad. That's still an A+, right? Right, Bob? That's still an A+.
Ashley, I really appreciate, I think you gave us great visuals and just the right amount of detail to explain, some of the variances from year to year. And I really appreciate that. Thank you for all of your work on this. I know it's been a tough year in a lot of ways, and putting together the forecast with a new system to do it in a fairly new district for you is also quite a bit of a challenge. So thank you. I'm pretty sure you put in some hours on the weekends on this, and we appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And you do explain it very well. And actually that piece of having the graph on the upper left, helps a lot too, because yes, the scales are all the same, but you're talking $32 million versus $600,000. The bars still look as high, but it's totally different scale.
Yeah.
So that helps. That's good. All right. Thank you very much. Next, we'll move on to audience community participation. I know I had no requests. Ms. Brudno, did you have any?
I did not.
Hey, Dr. Hunt?
I did not.
All right, great. Or disappointing, I don't know. I guess maybe I should say. So next we'll have the consent agenda. We have, if I could have a motion for consent agenda items 8A through 8J.
So moved.
Ooh, it's a tie.
I'll second then.
All right. Greg, you got it. Mary Kay, you got the second. If we have any items to discuss here.
Normally we wouldn't, but I did have a question, Bob. Dr. Fishman, I believe, is on our diversity and inclusion committee. Is this going to impact her ability to participate?
I did not reach out to her yet. I will do that. That's one of the reasons we did get two co-chairs for the
Yeah, because she was a co-chair, right? Okay, so we'll replace her if we needed, or if she's able to participate.
Yeah, I'll shoot her an email tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay, great. Anything else? All right, seeing none. Ms. Brudno, if you'd please take the roll.
Mr. Rankin.
Yes.
Mr. Kinzinger.
Yes.
Mrs. Bros.
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey.
Yes.
Mrs. O'Toole.
Yes.
Great. Next up, we have superintendent's recommendation. If I get a motion for 9A through 9C.
So moved.
In a second.
Second.
All right. Thank you, Greg. Dr. Hunt, if you would like to speak to these.
Sure. Item A is a MOU regarding payment for winter sports. That aligns with similar MOU that we did last spring and in the fall of this year regarding sports. Item B is the approval of athletic coaches. We're waiting to get that MOU finalized before approving the coaches. And then item C is a resignation, leave, retirement for a certified class member.
Bob, would you just elaborate a little bit more on the winter sports and the impact of the decision you just announced tonight and how that has already been incorporated into this MOU?
Yeah, so I mean, this basically benchmarks the season, and they get paid, throughout. Honestly, depending on how long we press pause, it could end. So we may have to talk and work through that with the union. Obviously, our coaches are going to still be working with kids and going through practice. So as of right now, this kind of benchmarks based on the season and completion of the season. We may have to look at that depending on what January holds.
Thank you. So as with the fall sports, we anticipated there might not be full seasons, and that's why you put these MOUs in place. This is identical to that one. And for any parents that are concerned, we're not paying for, if the season is canceled, we're not paying for a full season of work for the coaches, but we felt it was fair to compensate them for the portions of the season that they do complete, which is often more substantial than we realize, even if games aren't being played. There's, work that's being done with the student athletes.
Yeah, and
these
positions are, they're involved year round. I mean, they're doing things off season as well. So it's a recognition of that while being fair as well.
All right. Any other discussion? All right, Ms. Brudno, if you'd please take the roll.
Mr. Rankin,
Yes.
Mr. Kanziger,
Yes.
Mrs. Bros,
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey,
Yes.
Mrs. O'Toole.
Yes.
Okay, moving on to treasurer's recommendations. If I could have a motion for items 10A through 10H.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
Thank you, Greg. Oops, we lost Sharon. Okay. Ms. Brudno, if you'd please talk through these items.
Yep. Item A is the 5-year forecast, which I think I have used my allotted time on. The actual report is attached there, though, if you want to glance through it. Item B is the monthly financial reports for October. Again, because I have taken up so much time, I'm not going to go through these in detail. The one thing you'll notice is that now that we do have annual estimates, I did include monthly estimates in those reports. So you'll see that going forward. Item C is a consulting agreement with Gallagher. That's our health consultant, our healthcare consultant. This is not new, but in the past, they were compensated through Medical Mutual. They received a portion of what we paid to Medical Mutual. Now, because we are self-insured, we will be paying them directly. And it's not a change in the amount of money that we would have paid. It's just a different way of paying them because we will be self-insured.
Just a quick question on that one.
Mm-hmm.
Since we were switching to this new agreement, did we RFP or RFQ that who's going to be the administrator of that, or?
We did not, because it's not a new service and we're not changing consultants. We're paying for the same service and all of the same item. We just are paying them directly instead of paying it through Medical Mutual.
Okay. But then do we look at that administrator like on an annual basis or every 2 or 3 years, or?
Every few years. It's not something that I would suggest looking at annually. That's not something you want to change all the time, because we do work so closely with them, and we need somebody who has a little bit of history on our data to really be able to advise us effectively. So it's not something I would suggest we change every year, but every few years, certainly just keep them on their toes.
We talked about this in the last healthcare committee meeting. Was it within the last couple months, because there have been some people that have reached out to the district and expressed an interest and felt that they could give us advantageous rates. But Phil, the committee came to the conclusion that during the year when we're transitioning to self-insurance, it was better to keep the consultant the same, so we carry through that history and have access to some of the data that we might lose if we were to switch over right now. So I think Ashley said, I think we said we would bring it back around for discussion next year, and then if people were in agreement, begin a RFP process of evaluating other vendors. Is that right?
Yeah, we would interview, have people present to us, and it'd be somewhat lengthy process because it's really important work, that we really need somebody who is really gonna work for us. So
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Item D is the Delta Dental renewal. This one just kind of slipped through the cracks when we approved the Medical Mutual renewal. The Delta contract was not brought forward, and that's just that's on me. I just forgot about it because it was 0% increase and there's no change in the benefit. I just didn't think about it. Item E is the authorization to request tax advances. This is just an annual approval so that I can request advances from the county auditors and participate in those advances throughout the year. Item F is a new tax rate resolution, and this is needed to include the additional 3.85 mils that was just passed. So our original tax rate resolution that we approved obviously did not include the 3.85 mils. And in order to include that, we have to pass a new resolution. Item G, these are amendments to appropriations. Most of these funds are federal funds that when you don't spend the entire allocation in one year, it rolls over to the next year. However, they don't give you that allocation until a couple months into the year. So most of these federal funds are due to that. The ESSER, which is the 507, and the coronavirus relief funds, which is the 510, those are new funds based on the CARES Act. So it's establishing those. 467 is the student wellness. That one was just left off of the original appropriation. And then the two at the top, I have reasons there for the uniform school supplies is just to purchase the Chromebooks out of there. That was not originally appropriated for in that fund. And then public school support, Gurney has brought in some extra revenue, and they want to be able to spend that. And in order to do that, we have to appropriate it. Item H is some then and nows. The first two there, those are St. Joan of Arc's purchase orders. And then the last one there is ours, and that is legal services. I am recommending your approval of these items.
Okay. Any other questions? Any other discussion?
Just a point of clarity. If there's a board member that's considering taking the health insurance next year, do they need to abstain from the Delta Dental renewal, or does it not matter?
I don't think it matters. The decision was already made. It's the same company, and there's no change. It's just a renewal on the new contract. There wasn't any, they're not participating in asking to increase benefits or anything like that. So I don't think it's an issue.
Good.
And theoretically, we could have every board member participate in the benefits, and then what would we do? So.
Regarding Gurney, I wonder if you know Dr. Jones's plan. I know we're not just spending money because we have it, so I'm sure there's a good intention for using that principals fund.
I'm sure there is. I don't remember what it was. They wanted to put a purchase order through and requested, to increase their appropriation because the cash balance is there. But I can move, I have the authority to move within lines. I don't have the authority to increase without board approval. So I could go back through those emails and let you know what it was, but I don't recall offhand.
Right. It's a large balance, and I'm sure Dr. Jones has something, substantial planned to do with that. It'd be nice to, at some point, get an update, maybe in the board report, just so we know.
The increase is only 4,800. The other, I don't think she wanted to move from the other lines that she had already appropriated, which we could have done, but I think she had those already set aside for other things she wanted to spend. And the 150 is not all hers. The 150 is the total 018. So that's all the schools. That's the fund. So the 018 has special cost centers for every building, and they each have their own. Then in addition to that, we have, they each also have their own field trip special cost center. So really her increase is only the 4,800. The 150 is the whole district. That's not all hers. But there was a specific use for the 4,800. I just don't remember what it was.
Okay. I'm glad you clarified that. I did read that as the entire amount was happening at Gurney. So
yeah, no,
4,800.
Yeah, no, I apologize. The 150 is the whole district.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Nope. Ms. Brudenell, if you'd please take the roll.
Mr. Rankin.
Yes.
Mr. Kanziger.
Yes.
Mrs. Bros.
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey.
Yes.
Mrs. O'Toole.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Is there any other business for this evening? All right. Seeing none, the announcement of our next meeting will be December 9th at 6 p.m. Hopefully via Zoom. We will see if the lawmakers can come through for us. And that is it. If I could have a motion for adjournment.
I'll move that.
In a second, please.
Second. Second, third, fourth.
Okay, you got it, Sharon. All right. If you will please take the most popular vote of the evening, Ms. Brudenell.
Mr. Rankin.
Yes.
Mr. Kanziger.
Yes.
Mrs. Bros.
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey.
Yes.
Mrs. O'Toole.
Let me see. Yes.
Come on.
Needs to get back to that baby.
Yeah.
Don't start rumors, Sharon.
Oh, sorry. Grandchild.
Yeah.
Still a baby.
And we want Bob to get back to resting. So
You mean to start resting?
yeah, I know. I if I had a magic wand to make that happen, but all right. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.